I knew something was off the second I stepped out of my truck and heard my electric meter grinding like it was trying to take flight. Not a soft little spin. I'm talking full-on roar, like a blender chewing gravel. And the weird part? My cabin was lit up. Porch light on. A warm glow leaking through the curtains. Like somebody had been living there all week. Which was funny, because I hadn't been up in months. I walked up the steps, keys in hand, still half convinced I'd left something running last time, and then I saw it. A thick, bright yellow extension cord, the industrial kind you'd use to run a welder, plugged straight into the exterior outlet under my porch rail. It ran across my deck, dipped off the edge, and disappeared into the trees like some neon vine feeding something hungry. I just stood there for a second, staring, trying to process the audacity. Then the brush rustled, and out stepped the culprit like she'd been waiting for a dramatic entrance. Mid-40s, hair bleached within an inch of its life, sunglasses the size of dinner plates, and that posture some people have where they're already mad at you even though you haven't spoken yet. She marched up like she owned the ridge. And before I could say anything, she said it first. "Excuse me, can I help you?" That's when I realized she didn't just plug in and run. She was confident, comfortable, like she'd done it 100 times. I pointed at the cord. "That's plugged into my cabin." She didn't even look. "Yeah, unplug it." She laughed, like I'd asked her to stop breathing. "No." And right then, I felt something hot crawl up the back of my neck. Not rage exactly. More like that slow, disbelieving burn you get when someone breaks into your space and acts like you're the inconvenience. Let me back up a little, because none of this happened in a vacuum. That cabin was my escape hatch, my reset button. I work in the city, and I'm the kind of person who carries stress like a backpack I can't take off. Deadlines, traffic, noise, people. So a few years ago, I went looking for a quiet place that didn't ask anything from me. I found a little cabin tucked into a forested ridge near a lake, about 5 acres of pine and rock and silence. No HOA, no community guidelines, just dirt roads and property lines, and a general understanding that you mind your business. I bought it fast, probably too fast, but I loved it. The cabin needed work, so on weekends I'd drive up with tools in the bed, groceries in a cooler, and my brain finally slowing down as the cell service faded. And because I'm the paranoid, detail-obsessed type, I started with the electrical. New meter, updated panel, outdoor outlets replaced. Everything clean, safe, labeled. I wanted peace, but I also wanted the kind of peace where nothing catches fire while I'm 2 hours away. For a while, it was perfect. Then the bills started creeping up. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe the water heater. Maybe the fridge was old. Maybe I left the heat on a little too high. But month after month, the cost kept rising, even when I barely stayed there. One bill was almost triple what it should have been. I kept telling myself I'd check it next trip. Then one weekend, I show up, and my meter sounds like it's auditioning for NASCAR. So I did what any stubborn person with a little too much pride would do. I didn't call anyone. I tested. I went inside and flipped every breaker off. Every single one. Lights dead. Appliances dead. Cabin silent. Then I walked back out to the meter, still spinning like a roulette wheel. That's when I knew it wasn't something inside the cabin. It was outside. Somebody was drawing power directly from my exterior outlet. And that's when I noticed the path. Pine needles flattened, broken twigs, a faint trail like someone had been walking that route repeatedly. Not hiking, not wandering, purposeful. So I made a plan. Next weekend, I parked my truck way back down the road, hiked in quietly, and tucked myself behind a stand of trees with a thermos of coffee and a pair of binoculars. I felt ridiculous, but I also felt weirdly calm. Like, okay, let's see who thinks my cabin is a public charging station. Around mid-morning, a white SUV rolled up slowly, like it didn't want to be noticed. Out stepped the same woman I'd just met on my porch, except this time, she wasn't surprised, wasn't defensive. She walked straight to the side outlet like it was hers, popped her trunk, and pulled out that massive yellow cord. Plugged in without hesitation. That's when I stepped out from the trees and walked down the gravel like a horror movie villain who pays property taxes. "Hey," I called out. She spun around, startled for half a second, and then her face hardened into pure irritation. "What are you doing sneaking around?" she snapped. "I own this cabin," I said, calm but firm. "You're stealing my electricity." And she actually rolled her eyes. "No, I'm not." I pointed at the cord again. "That's my outlet. That's my meter. That's my power bill." She crossed her arms, like she was the one being wronged. This is a shared ridge. Everybody helps everybody. It's mountain rules. Mountain rules, I repeated, because my brain couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. She stepped closer and lowered her voice like she was offering some sacred truth. My power got shut off. I need this. You're not even here most of the time. And that right there told me everything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't mistaken. She'd been watching my schedule. She knew I was a weekend owner, and she counted on me being too busy, too polite, or too clueless to notice. I said, unplug it. Now. She smiled, a tight, smug little smile, and pulled out her phone. Fine, she said. I'll call the cops. And when they get here, I'll tell them you attacked me. I blinked. What? And she did it. Right there. On my porch. Loudly. Dramatically. Like she'd been rehearsing. Yes, hello. I need officers. There's a man harassing me. He's trying to stop me from accessing community electricity. He's threatening me. I just stood there watching her, thinking, this cannot be real life. This feels like a sketch comedy scene that went off the rails. But then I heard it. Gravel crunching. An engine. A sheriff's cruiser crawling up my driveway. She instantly switched from smug to theatrical victim mode, waving both arms like she was guiding in a rescue helicopter. When the two deputies stepped out, she rushed them like they were her personal bodyguards. Arrest him, she demanded. He attacked me. He's stealing electricity. He's trespassing. He's dangerous. The taller deputy held up a hand. Ma'am, slow down. Who owns this property? She pointed at me like I was a rabid animal. He rents it from me. The deputy looked at me, then looked at the cabin, then looked at the cord still plugged into my outlet. I said, Officer, I own this cabin. I have the deed. I have the utility account. And that cord is plugged into my outlet. The deputy asked, Ma'am, do you have any proof you rent this place to him? She froze for half a beat. Then she puffed up. I don't need to prove anything. It's community property. The younger deputy's eyebrows climbed so high they almost left his face. Community property with a private electric meter? I handed the taller deputy a folder I'd brought, deed copy, utility bills, photos of the meters spinning with the breakers off, timestamped notes. He flipped through it slowly, and the more he read, the more his expression changed from neutral to tired. Like, here we go? Another one. He walked over to the cord and followed it with his eyes into the woods. Where does this lead? He asked her. She snapped. That's none of your business. Wrong answer. The younger deputy said, Actually, if it's drawing power without permission, it is our business. They told her they needed to follow it. She tried to block them. You can't go on my property. The taller deputy didn't even blink. Ma'am, if your property contains evidence of theft, we can. So the three of us walked down the slope following that bright yellow cord like it was a trail of guilt. She trailed behind, screaming about rights and injustice and how neighbors are supposed to help each other, while also claiming she'd never met me before in her life. At the bottom of the hill was her place, and place is generous. It looked like a half-renovated trailer wrapped in cheap siding, with junk scattered everywhere. The cord went straight through a window, and inside, you could see it all. A space heater glowing orange, a mini fridge rattling, a microwave, 2 lamps, a TV, and a window AC unit that looked like it belonged in a museum. The younger deputy let out this low whistle. That's a lot. The taller deputy turned to her. Ma'am, you're running multiple appliances off an extension cord plugged into someone else's property. She screamed, I needed it. It's cold. My food will spoil. I have to protect myself. The deputy said, That doesn't give you permission to steal. And then came the moment I'll never forget. The taller deputy looked at his partner, nodded once, and said, We're recommending charges. Trespassing. Utility theft. Filing a false report. She shrieked like a banshee and started shouting about lawsuits and the mayor in emotional distress, but it didn't matter. They cuffed her anyway. Watching that cord go limp on my porch afterward felt like the mountain itself was finally exhaling. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Later that day, after the deputies left, an older man showed up walking up the dirt road with a cane. Weathered face, calm eyes, the kind of guy who looks like he's been part of the land longer than the trees. He nodded at my porch. Saw the law up here. I said, yeah, had a situation. He chuckled once, no humor in it. Let me guess. Tessa. I stared. You know her? He sighed. Everybody knows her. She's been poking around cabins for months. Folks too tired to fight, too polite, too busy. That word, polite, hit me harder than it should have. Because that's what she was counting on. People staying quiet to keep the peace while she took what she wanted. He introduced himself as Glenn, told me he'd heard complaints up and down the ridge, flickering lights, weird meter spikes, outlets tampered with. Then he leaned in and said something that made my stomach drop. You're probably not the only one she's been tapping. So I walked the perimeter again, more alert now, and that's when I found it, a second cord. Blue, different direction, not mine, running uphill toward another cabin. That's when this stopped being a weird personal story and started looking like a pattern. I drove into town and filed a formal statement with the sheriff's office. Gave them everything. Photos, notes, the adapter piece I found on the trail that looked partially melted, like someone overloaded a line. The detective didn't look shocked. He looked tired, like he'd been waiting for someone with actual proof. Then, as I'm leaving the station, my phone buzzes. Unknown number. Voicemail. It's her, screaming, "This isn't over. I'm taking your cabin. You ruined my life. You're going to pay." I listened twice, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She'd been released fast. And now she was angry. That night back at the cabin, I found fresh tire tracks in my driveway that weren't mine and weren't law enforcement. Then I found something even worse. The panel near my electrical service had been pried at, wires exposed like someone tried to mess with it. And right when I'm standing there staring at it in the rain, a dented pickup sits halfway down my drive like a threat left on display. A man steps out of the trees, broad shoulders, heavy boots, jaw clenched. Not her. Her brother. He didn't introduce himself. He just pointed at my cabin and growled, "You had my sister arrested." I said, "She got herself arrested. She was stealing." He stomped closer. "You're going to fix this. You're going to tell the sheriff you lied." And in that moment, I realized he wasn't here to talk. He was here to intimidate. So I pulled out my phone and hit record. His eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" "Documenting," I said. "Keep talking. The sheriff will love it." He tried to puff up like the phone didn't matter, but the doubt flashed across his face. He knew the law didn't care about his feelings. And then Glenn, the older neighbor, stepped out of the rain like he'd been summoned by common sense. He looked at the brother and said, real calm, "You can leave, or you can make this worse for your sister." That stopped him. Not because he respected me, but because he didn't want to be the final nail in her coffin. He spit in the gravel, muttered, "This isn't the end," and peeled out down the mountain. After he left, I installed more cameras, motion lights, reinforced locks, because at that point, it wasn't just a theft story. It was a boundary story. The next day, a new neighbor, a woman named Rachel, came by my porch, nervous, hands wringing. She said, "They came to our house. Your neighbor and her brother. They said you attacked her, that you tried to electrocute her. They're trying to get signatures." I laughed, but it came out bitter. I told Rachel the truth. She didn't just believe me. She looked angry for me. She promised she'd talk to the other new owners, that she wouldn't let them spread lies unchecked. For the first time in days, I felt something like support. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me standing on my porch, taken from the woods, and underneath it, for words that made my blood run cold. "You should have stayed quiet." I forwarded it to the detective immediately. Screenshot, timestamp, everything. And I sat there staring out at the tree line thinking, wow. So this is what it looks like when entitled people lose control. They don't apologize. They escalate. Here's the thing, though. I didn't buy that cabin to be scared off my own land. And I didn't spend years building a life just to let someone with a cord and an attitude decide what I deserve. I stayed calm. I documented. I let facts do what anger can't. And that's what changed everything. Because once the paper trail exists, once the footage exists, once the threats exist, the story stops being, he said, she said. It becomes evidence. But I'm going to be honest. I still don't know how far they were willing to take it. And that's what keeps me thinking. Were they desperate? Were they dangerous? Or were they just so used to pushing people around that they couldn't handle someone finally saying no? So here's what I want to ask you, and I mean it. If you were in my shoes, would you have confronted her right away? Or would you have gone straight to the sheriff the first time you suspected the theft? And do you think people like that deserve a second chance when they get caught? Or do they only learn when the consequences finally hit hard? Drop your take in the comments. I read them, and I'm genuinely curious where you draw the line between helping a neighbor and being taken advantage of. And if you've ever dealt with someone like this, a bully, a manipulator, someone who weaponizes the system and plays victim, tell your story too. It might help somebody else realize they're not crazy. They're just finally seeing the game for what it is.